Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Paddocks. You may have noticed we missed Wednesday's episode, our bad, but that's because, just like Formula One, we're on a little winter break. So listen in for a new episode every Friday until the season begins again. Now, to start off the winter break, we're going to take a little break ourselves from Formula One and talk about the 2023 MotoGP season. On the episode, we have Hanna and Ito with LeAnne and myself, Chelsea, behind the scenes. To start us off is Ito with a few highlights from the season.
The 2023 MotoGP season was honestly an exciting one and very eventful. It featured 20 races with 8 different winners, and it was showcasing the competitive nature of the sport. The season was characterized, as oftentimes is the case with MotoGP, by intense racing. And the hashtag Tiso Sprint Madness and a thrilling title fight that lasted until the very end. One standout rider, Pecco Bagnaia, who faced significant setbacks with a crash at Barcelona, was, however, the winner because he demonstrated resilience and determination, scoring valuable points throughout the season. And that's why he emerged the champion, proving his skill, experience, and composure, and of course, mental strength. He had a tough rival, though, in Jorge Martin, but ultimately the reigning champion was the winner once again.
Yeah, and like Ito said, this was also the first year sprint races were introduced to MotoGP and were honestly widely liked by the fans as it brought more racing to the World Championship of Motorsports. It's very similar to Formula One, where there's a short form of racing prior to the traditional Grand Prix that you see on Sundays. I do love how they kept a very similar structure to the two, so you kind of know what you're getting out of the gate. This season was also pretty remarkable for, like Ito said, having 8 different winners and no back to back winners for the first time since I think like the mid late 1900s. I don't exactly remember the date, but that is pretty incredible. I also like to note that I also really did enjoy the season of seeing all the craziness in these weekends with racing, the crashes, and it's just insane to watch. And how they really honestly bounce back from that in general. Like, I don't know how they do it. But now that we've covered some of the highlights of the season, let's go ahead and dive right in on the driver championship. So, we're going to talk about some fun facts from the top 10 drivers. So, I will say Marco Besici, and I'm so sorry if I said that wrong, um, for only being in MotoGP for 2 years is pretty incredible to see him get in the top 3 this year. That kid can race. And Francisco, dude, you were on fire defending the title honestly perfectly. Even with 4 retirements and did not starts, you still managed to stay really consistent. And I just have to say, Ducati, well, you are my favorite choice of bike, let's be honest. I'm still so glad to see it on top, even though I'm not a huge fan of the dry clutch on the bike. Anywho, and now Fabio. I just want to say it seems Yamaha is doing you proud. You scored basically every race, but I'm hoping from a Yamaha standpoint, the competitiveness does get some improvements for 2024. And then lastly, I will say I am pretty proud to see Alex Espargaro win his home race Grand Prix in the sprint race and the main race in Catalunya. It's got to be pretty incredible to win like your home race because that atmosphere and that feel is got to be remarkable. And now to talk some fun facts between the drivers that landed in 11th through 20th. I won't lie, this year was really rough for me to watch Marc Marquez. He retired, he did not finish, and consistently this season was just rough to watch for him. I really hope with the 2024 season, we start to see some positive changes in the right direction. Please.
Amen. As a Mark girl, it was a hard one, especially with his early injury. Thankfully, though, he did win one race.
I mean, something is better than nothing. I agree, Ito. I mean, ever since I think it was 2 years ago when he broke his collarbone and he had like to go through a really pretty rough recovery, he's never seemed to bounce back to the 8 world champion Marc Marquez that we're used to. But I also want to talk about Alex Rins. He missed 7 consecutive Grand Prix, starting from the German GP after undergoing surgery on a broken right leg that was sustained during the sprint race, but still managed to finish in the top 20. I will say, out of 31 drivers on the grid, that is pretty incredible to see. And then lastly, let's talk about the remainder of the grid, 21 through 31. John Mir. He missed the German and Dutch rounds after suffering a right hand injury during practice at the Italian Grand Prix, and he was not replaced, but later on was replaced by Iker Lecuona for the Dutch Grand Prix. Now, Paul Espargo, he missed 7 consecutive Grand Prix. Lord, that's a lot of Grand Prix to miss. Starting from the Argentine Grand Prix after suffering numerous injuries, all the way to the Portuguese Grand Prix. And he was not replaced during any of that until the USGP, where he was replaced by Jonas Frogge. Now, to move on to the Constructors' Championship, aka the Manufacturer Championship. So these are the manufacturers. These are the people you get the bikes from. They are the creators of the bikes for MotoGP. So I'm just going to talk about the top 5. So Ducati getting in first place with 700 points. KTM, also sponsored by Red Bull, getting 373 points. Number 3, Aprilia, getting 326 points. Yamaha getting 196 points. And in 5th place, Honda with 185. So I will say Ducati has really come back and is pushing towards a really unbeatable team in motorcycle. I mean, their team, their drivers, they're unmatched compared to the rest of the grid. And Ducati won 17 of the 20 Grand Prix to secure their 5th Constructors' Championship, while Ducati's satellite team, Padmac Racing, won the team's championship. Fun fact, in Indonesia, that race actually marked the 500th Grand Prix victory for the tire company Michelin, whose first victory was actually in 1973 with Jack Finley, which is the sponsor for the tires that get used on the bikes, but they are not required to use them for every team. So it's pretty remarkable to see like Pirelli versus Michelin versus Bridgestone, kind of see which one who everybody picks. And then lastly, to kind of round out talking about manufacturers, let's talk about the top 5 teams. So in number 1, we had Prima Padmac Racing. Number 2, Ducati Lenovo team. Number 3, Mooney V46 Racing Team. Number 4, Red Bull KTM Factory Racing. And number 5, Aprilia Racing. So I just want to touch on Aprilia Racing. I will say I'm pretty proud of Aprilia, as their first year as a team on their own was kind of in 2022. And both 2022 and 2023, they've ended the year from a team standing in the top 5, as last year they landed in 3rd place overall, and this year being 5th. I mean, they have a pretty good street bike, but to see they take the street bike and make it a very competitive racing bike is really cool to see, and see how they just came in and dominated from the beginning. And now, let's talk about silly season. I know it's one thing that we all love to hear. I mean, it's where the craziness typically happens between the teams and the drivers. But I do want to say that I love MotoGP and how it fuels the silly season aspect of it all, as they actually have an Instagram channel literally called MotoGP Silly Season. which is great to see because they even post conspiracies. And when the actual news drops of what it's supposed to be or what's actually going to happen, they post the articles and the never before seen stuff of it. So it's pretty hilariously fun.
Yeah, I mean, that channel is honestly one of my favorite Instagram channels that I follow. But let's dive in, actually. So it was a long one, but we saw Joan Zarco leave Premac Racing for LCR Honda Castrol, while Jorge Martin will replace him, and where the Spaniard will partner Franco Morbidello. The Italian moves on to Ducati machinery after his time with Yamaha comes to a conclusion. So Premac will have an all-new lineup. For KTM, we also saw some movements as Red Bull KTM Factory Racing will line up with Brad Binder and Jack Miller, with Binder extending his contract until 2026. And that was announced after Austria. Paul Espargo with Gas, Agustinos Fernandez also with Gas, and Pedro Acosta with Red Bull KTM Aiello were the riders linked to just two RC16s, and in the end, Fernandez and Acosta won out. And Espargo will remain with the team next season, but will transition into a different role. I couldn't really find what role that will be, but I'm assuming reserve driver, test driver, what have you.
And now, before I let you go on more about silly season and the changes that you'll see, I just want to let you know most of the drivers, unless you are in the top factory teams, aka Honda, KTM, Ducati, like their actual team versus like their sub teams, there's a clause in their contract that states that any driver would be allowed to leave early in their contract if they are offered a seat with a factory team. And fun fact, it is usually highly prized, and if given the opportunity, given the lack of seats typically available, most drivers jump at the opportunity to have that because, I mean, who wouldn't want to sit at the top with a factory team?
So as for Yamaha, with only two bikes on the grid, it was announced ahead of the British GP that Alex Rins from LCR Honda Castrol would be joining Quadraro Fabio in factory blue for 2024, which is exciting, honestly. And lastly, Honda, which in my eyes saw the biggest change of all because Marc Marquez is leaving Repsol Honda after 11 years and joining his brother Alex at Gresini. Hence, Joao Mir will partner with Luca Marini in 2024, and the Italian joins from Mooney VR46 after a 2-year deal. And this is actually his first opportunity on a full factory spec bike, which, as Hannah mentioned, is the sought after thing.
I won't lie, I was pretty shocked and scared for this Marc Marquez move as he has been with Honda since the start of his MotoGP journey. And they have done him well since he's an eighth world champion because of them. And I wonder since the last 2 to 3 years, he's been in a little bit of a rut due to injuries and consistency in racing, that he's kind of jumping ship for better waters. I don't know. It seems not very thought out, if you ask me. But I'm interested on what 2024 will bring for the brothers racing together. But as a girl who kind of loves contracts and learning all of that, I will say MotoGP contracts usually have some kind of performance clause as well, allowing teams to ditch riders if they are not performing up to the pre agreed standard that is given to them, and allowing riders to dump teams if they feel that the bike is not what they were promised. And Lord knows, this year's bike, it just wasn't it.
Now, as for LCR, Taka Nagami has signed on for another season, and we'll have Joan Zarco on the other side of the box.
And then lastly, to kind of round out some of the changes from the silly season, I did want to say that Luca Marini decided to retire and leave the team after the 2023 season. So that was pretty interesting to see. And we don't know where the future of him racing is going to land, or if he just decided, I'm going to spend more time with my family. So I'm looking forward to see what comes out of that. But I want to touch on some changes that we saw for this season in the calendar, as though there was quite a lot, but here are just some that happened. So some of the calendar changes that were made for the first time since 2006. Lusail and Qatar did not host the opening round due to extensive renovations and remodeling in the paddock area and circuit facilities. AKA, this was for Formula One. Fun fact. And then the British Grand Prix returned to the international paddock of Silverstone for the first time since 2012. I was really excited to see that back on the grid. And then the Hungarian Grand Prix was scheduled to make its debut in 2023, but it was postponed to 2024 due to unstarted construction on the circuit. They haven't even gotten it ready for MotoGP yet. Ay, ay, ay. And then lastly, the Aragon Grand Prix was omitted from the schedule for the first time since its introduction into MotoGP in 2010, which was pretty interesting. I don't know if they are, since it was, these are just some of the many that got changed on the calendar, if they decided to change things up a little bit for the drivers so they get to go to new circuits, they get to go to new areas, or if it was contracts. So I'm, for one, interested in that, so I plan to do some more research on it.
Now, as for our hopes for next year, our hopes for the break, and some of our favorite moments of 2023. Honestly, my hopes for next year as a Fabian Mark fan, I just hope they do well. Because while they, especially Fabio, placed relatively high in the standings, they both were plagued by a lot of mishaps, let's say that. And I just hope they pull some wins out of the bag. And honestly, for Mark's move to Ducati, I'm honestly hopeful. I know Hanna doesn't agree with me, but I think, as a lot of people say, the postseason testing was already very exciting for him, from what people were saying on the internet, to the point where they are saying he will win another championship next year. While honestly, that would be the dream. I don't think it will happen in the first year with the team. Because let's be honest, that would be a huge thing to accomplish. As for the rest of the grid, though, I just hope we get another exciting season where we see a lot of close racing. Hopefully not as many injuries, but it's MotoGP, so there are bound to be some injuries.
Yeah, and to kind of touch on the hopes for the break, as years past has shown for me, a lot of these guys attend a lot of award ceremonies right after races and the end of the year events. And we do see a lot of them go back home and spend a lot of time with their family. So I just hope they get to relax and get to mentally prepare for the 2024 season that will be here actually before we know it. I mean, it seems like it goes by in a blink of an eye sometimes. It is also cool to see some of them even go-karting in their break as a way, I think, to still stay prepared and fluid with driving. Honestly, not sure. You don't typically see them on a bike after a MotoGP. They're like, peace out, bye. I'm taking a break. So maybe go-karting is their way to still have fun while racing? I'm not sure. And I think one of my favorite moments of 2023 would be, and this isn't in regards to racing, but getting to see Valley Yellow, aka Valentino Rossi, attend so many races as a retired driver. He truly loves the sport, and I really do think he is very missed. And even because of that, he still makes a point to be there. And now that we've kind of wrapped up 2023 season, I do want to just talk a little bit more about Marc Marquez. I mean, he's one of the most known drivers on the grid. And I want to talk about the what ifs of him and what ifs of some of the other drivers. Now, for instance, 3 years ago when Marc Marquez broke his collarbone, or even this past year when he had suffered another injury. Let's say he didn't do that. Do you think that he would have gone in the world championship this year? Or do you think he still would have scored where he was going to? What are your thoughts, Ito?
I mean, honestly, knowing he got that many world championships in the past when he wasn't injured, I think I would hope, let's put it that way, that he would have gotten another title or at least more wins. But at the same time, the bike wasn't up there. So I also want to kind of theorize what would happen if he, say, moved to Ducati sooner or moved to a different team sooner, because the bike hasn't been doing that well, at least not up to, I want to say, world championship standards for a couple of years now. So I don't think it's just his injuries, although they played a huge part, but it's also the bike.
No, I strongly agree. So, at the beginning of this year, Honda and Marc Marquez both came out with a statement saying that we want to win, that we know that we're capable of winning. We have a proven track record. The issue is like from a Marc Marquez standpoint, he's had issues, struggles with surgery, struggles with like the comebacks of it and the consistency of the bike per se from Honda. So at the end of the day, you kind of know what you're getting. And with Ducati kind of stepping up and becoming that team, that consistent team for the last 2 years, the dominating team with their two great drivers and even their sub teams, great drivers. I'm interested to see as we go on and some changes come out, because they are looking at making some changes to what the bikes can be as far as engine components, as far as staying consistent with the same tires across the board. So they're looking at having Michelin be the tire sponsor for every team versus them having to picking up the three. Maybe that will change some things up. I don't know how I feel about having same engine, same tires across the board.
I mean, honestly, same engines, I don't want to see it happen, honestly, because it would just turn into spec series, and I'm not a huge fan of spec series. However, same tires. I feel like same tires would be a good one because it would give teams that don't have as great a bike some more even playing fields, even though they have, say, a weaker engine or something, or a more unreliable engine. But at the same time, why not have more? Why not mix it up? So I'm kind of torn on the whole tire issue, but I'm definitely a no on the engine issue.
I think each engine component brings a different structure to the bike. And, a lot of times, and I can only relate this to personal motorsport bikes that you can actually buy out in the real world. where you cannot buy a racing bike out in the real world, is most of these teams, while they have like 1,000 cc bike, they have different horsepower aspects to it. And I think that's what sets them apart from everything, because like a 1,000 cc Honda bike could have 456 horsepower, I'm guessing on that. A Ducati 1,000 cc could have 526 horsepower. It's all how they lenient the bike. And like I said, Ducati's a dry clutch, which means that they have a different advantage, but also a different disadvantage compared to like a Honda, a KTM. And KTM also, known fact, or maybe not known to some of the listeners, is they are more dominating when it's raining outside than the dry circuit, which even KTM and their drivers are like, what the heck? I am even curious on what the heck, because most of the time you have no traction, your bike's wobbly, you can't see out of that visor worth shit, and you're just like, what the heck is going on? So I've always just been curious on how that works from a logistics side.
Amen. Because we all know across the different motorsport series like Formula One, MotoGP, etc., we know rain equals chaos. But then for a team to dominate in the rain for some, I want to say, random reason is just like, what the hell's happening? Why are you guys so good in the rain? And why do you not know why you're so good? Like, they didn't plan for this. And usually in MotoGP, you plan for everything. It's so surprising, honestly.
I'm gonna go with their sponsor being Red Bull. It's got to be Red Bull, because Red Bull gives you wings, and if their track record of Formula One has anything to say for it, I mean, whatever they're doing, they are doing right. So that's all I gotta say. Red Bull, maybe just take it down a few notches for right now.
I mean, honestly, I would be very interested because Red Bull is in F1 and in MotoGP. I would be very interested to know whether they share stuff and to what extent they share stuff, whether they even can share stuff. Who knows? Like, I would be very interested. I think I'm going to do a deep dive on that. Would be a good winter break activity.
Probably from an FIA regulation standpoint, you probably can't do that. But you never know. I mean, how you build a Formula One car versus how you build a MotoGP car, very different aspects. Very. Now, I've never built a Formula One car. I've never seen under the hood Formula One car. I have had the pleasure of seeing under the hood of a MotoGP car and our MotoGP bike and a street bike, and it is different.
I mean, not only the wheels perspective, I mean, having only two wheels, like the whole, even just like the balance and the space you have for the engine is vastly different. But then again, Adrian Newey would say transition to MotoGP. I'm sure he could hack it somehow because it's Adrian Newey.
I mean, when in Rome, and you just never know. You just never know. I mean, let's be honest.
I got one more prompt for you guys. One more. I'll put you somewhere else. Give me the top 3 F1 drivers you think could compete in MotoGP, and then you can wrap it up.
Oh, I love this. You want to go first, Ida, or you want me?
Go first because I know one. I need to do the other two.
So, LeAnne, I love that because I've thought about that actually before. If I could choose 3 drivers, my first one, hands down, would be Lando Norris. which you already knew, because he also has an obsession with Valentino Rossi, like me. So, duh. Second, Daniel Ricciardo. He is seen to actually be at quite a few of the MotoGP races throughout the years. So that to me makes sense. But he is a little tall, so that leaning aspect of it all, when you're going around those turns, maybe not be so fluid. So maybe that wouldn't work. And then lastly, this might shock some people. I would choose. I'm torn between Oscar Piastri or Alex Albon. Alex Albon doesn't seem very adventurous to me. I mean, realistic choice, Max Verstappen, of course. Let's give you Max Verstappen. But
You just want to give him one more thing to dominate?
no, but yes, it would make sense. But and he's always talked about going into other motorsports after Formula One. So maybe. Oscar Piastri is a new one that we've seen in the paddock for MotoGP, and he actually seemed to really enjoy himself and getting to meet some of the drivers. So I could see that. But Alex Albon seems like he's a hidden adventurous person that I could actually see, doing pretty well. And yes, I did not pick any of my Ferrari boys.
Yeah, honestly, I don't think the Ferrari boys would do well. I would agree with that. But as soon as LeAnne gave us a prompt, I was like, Max, all the way. Because I don't know whether you guys saw that or remember, I think it was over summer break that he actually, I don't think he got to try out, like, in terms of, like, go out on track, but he at least sat on Mark's bike, and the pictures and videos just made it seem so natural for him. So that's my one pick. And then the other two, I want to go with size. I would love to see, honestly, Yuki. I don't, I know he wants to open his restaurant, so I'm not seeing that ever happen, but it would be interesting. And then my last pick is, he's no longer on the grid, but I would want to see Nick DeVries because he's been dominating or at least doing well across other series such as Formula E. So why not add something else? Why not try something else?
Honestly, that surprised me, the Yuki comment. Never would have thought of that. I'm not sure.
Honestly, it's just the eyes.
I can get that. But I would be curious if he can reach the foot pedals in the ground. Because isn't he like
not?
5
He would have to have a very modified bike.
Yeah. But hey, I'm willing to have anybody at least try things once in their lifetime. So when in Rome. And now to move on to our fun fact of the day. We're going to talk about MotoGP. So I want to do a famous quote that I actually really love. And this one's from the one and only Valentino Rossi. If you don't understand that trend, now you do. I absolutely love him. So this quote is, riding a race bike is an art, a thing that you do because you feel something inside. And I think I know what you mean, Valentino Rossi, as someone who has rode bikes for years, and is when I think of riding in general, it honestly takes a certain kind of adrenaline. To ride a bike is one thing, to be in tune with the bike and ride is another thing. Kind of a work of art, if you know what I mean, and be fluid in the movements, like when you do the turns, being aware of your surroundings, all of that.
I don't know about y'all, but it's always fun for me to learn about new motorsports. Since I'm still so new to this world, MotoGP might still stress me out, but I'm learning to enjoy it. Honestly, if you haven't yet, you should check out episode 49, A Lesson in MotoGP, now that this episode is wrapped up. What other motorsports do you want to hear about from us? Let us know on our socials. Everywhere we are at Paddock Girls Podcast, except for Twitter. There you can find us at Paddock Girls Pod. Thanks for joining us in the paddock. See you next week. Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.